Hello, everybody. My name is Max Nospish. I'm the manager of visitor experiences here at the First Amendment Museum located in Augusta, Maine. Today, I'm joined by a guest all the way on the West Coast, Mr. Norman Locke. Norman, thank you for joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm 94 years old, fifth generation Oregonian, Portland, Oregon. I have all kinds of weird education from law, economics, finance, to art, and I've donated part of my life to public service, nonprofits, and just in general, so I have a fairly broad background, so you can go ahead.
So, so Norman, why do you think the First Amendment is important? What is its purpose in your mind, in your eyes?
Well, the First Amendment differs the United States from most countries in the world. It gives us a type of life that most people don't know. It gives us freedom of many areas, religion, press, right to congregate, right to appeal for redress from government. It gives us a lot of rights that I don't know of any country that gives us these rights. In other words, you can scream bloody murder and at any political leader and not go to prison as of this moment.
As of this moment, exactly. So, Norman, you grew up in the Portland, Oregon Chinatown. Can you tell us a little bit about how and why Chinatown's formed?
Before we go into that, can I comment on the First Amendment some more?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. After World War II, I was an upperclassman in high school, and GIs were coming back to study, and they brought me books that were banned. And I was a high school student. I was amazed. I didn't know that the United States banned books. I thought there was freedom of the press, like books by Henry Miller, John Dos Passos. I couldn't wait to get my hands and open to see how bad these things were. After I read the book, I said, there's nothing bad about it. Why are they banned in the United States? So I don't understand. If we have the First Amendment, why are books banned? Do you understand? And then prayers in school. In the 1930s, every Wednesday, this is a white grade school, not a black or Asian. I went to a white grade school. Every Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they led our class out for religious instructions. Religious instructions. This is amazing. I was a grade school kid. I didn't think anything of it, but these things went on and on. Most people don't know that this happened in America. So, and then today they said you can't say a prayer in school. But the First Amendment says you can say a prayer in school as long as you don't interrupt the class and the teacher's not involved. So there's a lot of abridging the rights of the First Amendment in everyday life. This is my opinion. We have to stand up and scream bloody murder when the rights are, restricted. I mean, this is part of my answer to the First Amendment. I mean, I can go on, but what's your next question?
Yeah, take as long as you'd like to answer any of these questions. This is a fascinating perspective. So usually I talk to people between their 30s and 60s who weren't alive for a lot of this stuff. So it's interesting to talk to someone who actually has memories of stuff like what happened in the 1930s and 40s. So my next question is, you grew up in the Portland, Oregon Chinatown. Can you tell us a little bit about how and why Chinatown's formed?
Well, just my personal opinion, but I think Chinatowns are ghettos, quote, ghettos. They're formed because people were restricted where they could live. That's how Chinatowns were formed. And to carry that a little further, my uncle Chester was a graduate in political science in the 1930s, and I was very upset that cities were run like a mafia gang. In other words, racketeers could operate in cities as long as they paid off the cops and the cops paid off the politicians. The payoffs went up and down. Here I was, a great kid, very upset. So my Uncle Chester said, this is the way cities are run throughout the United States. Boss Curry, Boss Trump. And I said, oh my God. And my uncle said, this is the way the system's run. Everybody's paid off. So this is part of my growing up in Portland, not just Chinatown, but Portland. So the question is, what was it like growing up in Chinatown? Well, I grew up in Chinatown and I grew up in Whitetown because in 1935, my grandmother bought a home in a nice residential district. And at that time, Oregon law said a Chinese, even a Chinese American citizen, could not own land in Oregon. But my grandmother bought a brand new home in White District in 1935 because there was a depression and the contractor that built the house couldn't sell it, but my grandmother had the cash. So he said, here, you just bought a house. There was next door was a nice doctor and his family, so you know it was a good district. So I grew up in Chinatown and in a white district. I alternated. So I didn't, growing up in Chinatown, as I quoted, a ghetto. When you're a kid, you don't know you're in a ghetto. I mean, you just think this is the way everything is. But in retrospect, people didn't realize they were in ghettos. They just considered that normal life. So this is my answer to that.
So what was the civic and political life like in the Portland Chinatown when you were there and growing up, and honestly throughout your life?
Oh, Chinatown was part of the American political civic system. If they wanted to operate illegal operations, they just paid off the cops, just like the white people paid off. So I found out that in the black districts, they paid off the same, and the white gangsters that controlled the rest of the town collected from the minority ethnics, then paid off the upper control people upstairs. So it was very organized. Every ethnic group that wanted to operate could operate as long as they paid off. So you hear the story throughout the country that so-and-so got arrested because they didn't pay off. Well, the people in the underworld told me that's the worst story to hear because they would love to pay off. So that's not true when you hear somebody got arrested because they didn't pay off. They would love to pay off. Okay, so growing up in the ghetto, it was just normal to people because I could move my life out of the ghetto, in the ghetto, very smoothly with no problems. So I didn't have any problems. Okay.
What were the leaders like in Portland's Chinatown back then? Who were like the civic and social leaders?
All the leaders were leaders of various family organizations, church organizations. Then there was the Tongs. Tongs were originally formed as a protection to the Chinese that were being harassed by the whites. So they joined these various Tongs that they're like family organizations. So you have church groups, family organizations, Tongs, basically, and then there's a CCBA, Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, which is the master organization that they all belong to. So that's how they ran Portland. and other Chinatowns use similar models. So everything, went on. Everybody existed.
Were people in the Chinatown pretty active in politics? Did they vote and go to political rallies and events and form groups like that?
No, because they figured as long as they paid off, that was their political contribution. So the only time they got together was when the war with Japan in 1941, the Chinese in Portland raised money for relief organizations, and the United States was selling scrap metal to Japan to make bombs. So I was a little grade school kid. I remember picketing American organizations that, stop, sending these deadly materials for war. So the to answer to your question, do they organize? They organize under those conditions.
Were things very tense in Portland during World War II?
They were only tense when white people attacked Chinese thinking they were Japanese. And then the white people didn't realize that the Japanese Americans were incarcerated. So how could they be walking around like we were walking around? See how ignorant they were? They were their civil rights were taken away when in Constitution law and law school. The professor said the biggest violation of the Constitution was putting Japanese American citizens in prison camps without due process. Not only that, J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, you've heard of him, he said at that time that the Japanese Americans were not a threat to American security. But General DeWitt of the Pacific Coast Army told President Roosevelt, put them all in camps. So even though the FBI said they were not a threat, they were still put away, and their I think it was a money grab because their hotels and farms and ranches and real estate were sold for pennies on the dollar. So my attorney's father held a lot of assets for Japanese American citizens in trust. When they got out of the prison camps, he gave their assets back, their hotels and lands. So I found out that was not extraordinary because many Americans, white American citizens, did the same thing. They protected the Japanese Americans' properties from being sold by taking it over. So anyways, where were we going?
Nothing. I did go off script, as you can tell. I just had some follow-up questions, some of the stuff you've said. So going back to the script, how have Chinese Americans advocated for and advanced civil rights in our country?
Okay. The first civil rights regarding Chinese Americans started in 1895 in California. I think it was called the Sons of the Golden West, but in 1905 they changed the name to CAC, Chinese American Citizens Alliance. So beginning in 1895, it may be the oldest civil rights organization in the United States. So Chinese American Citizen Alliance has done a lot to try to get civil rights for Americans. Like in 1919, a Chinese American citizen in 1919 could not hold a U.S. civil service job. That's hard to believe, isn't it? So the CACA went to Washington, D.C. and got that changed. So to this day, there are about 20 some odd chapters in the United States of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance, and they meet nationally every 2 years to introduce new resolutions and to perpetuate what works for civil rights. So they stand for service and civil rights and patriotism. And so where were we going? What was civil rights? Were you talking about civil rights? Okay. There are many semi-organized groups of Chinese American citizens that just meet on their own to discuss civil rights. So they have an organization and then they operate independently. I think civil rights means a lot to them, individually and as a group. Okay.
So how do you utilize the First Amendment in your everyday life?
Well, I think one or two areas of the First Amendment. One is freedom of speech, sometimes considered a loudmouth, because I'll speak up when hardly anybody has the guts to speak up. And I have served on a lot of nonprofit organizations which exercises their freedom of getting together. And so those are the main parts of the First Amendment that has meaning to me. The expression, freedom of expression, that's what it means to me.
Have you ever attended any protests or anything like that throughout your life?
Is that in there?
No, I added that one. I'm just curious.
Oh,
It's okay if you have.
when I was a grade school kid, when the Americans were sending scrap steel to Japan to make bombs, I was a little kid holding a protest sign. But that I don't normally protest in public. I protest quietly and effectively. I'm more of a motivator. I stand behind and push people out there.
So your parents made you go to the protest though, right?
Go to where?
Yeah, the protests when you were young.
I guess so, but they also made me go to church.
Yeah.
In fact, I tell everybody I was a paid religionist, because if I didn't go to church, my grandmother would not give me my allowance. So one church we went to was the Baptist church, and the Baptists are very strict. You can't play cards, you can't do this, that, and that. So my brother and I sat in the front row of the church, and we couldn't wait till the lecture was over so we could go to the movies. So this was a Chinatown Presbyterian church, no, Baptist church, and the minister was a Scandinavian named Backlund, Bachlund, a white minister. And I'll never forget this. Maybe this can be edited, but my brother and I were grade school kids and we're listening. And he says, I struggled and I wrestled to write this sermon this Sunday. I struggled and we fought. And who was he fighting? He was fighting the devil. The devil tried to prevent him from writing the script. So I got tired of listening to this and I turned around. I'm a grade school kid, and I said to the audience behind me, I said, it was 2 out of 3 falls, ladies and gentlemen, and that broke up the house. So anyways, after we got out of there, I got my allowance. We went to the movies. So, I mean, there were a lot of funny aspects of my going to church. Went to the Presbyterian church and the Baptist church mainly. I mean, we went to their picnics and sports programs, but as you can tell, I was quite an outspoken kid.
Mm-hmm. When were your grandparents born?
They were born here in Portland.
When? I mean,
Oh, no, my grandmother was born in San Francisco, and my grandfather, I'm not sure where he was born, but my mother's grandfather was born in Spokane. My mother's father.
do you know what years or decades they were born?
My grandmother was born in the late 1800s. So my father was born in 1907 here. And my grandmother's sister, Helen, lived in Portland in 3 generations, in 3 centuries. My Aunt Helen lived here in the 1800s, 1900s, and 2000.
Wow.
Helen Leong and her 2 sons were doctors. They lived in the Alpina district in Portland, which was a tough district. Her husband worked for the railroad. She worked as a seamstress for the major department store. But and the daughter was a famous architect. She was practicing and designing buildings in her 90s in Corvallis, Oregon. There's a University of Cal professor researching to do a book about my cousin, the architect in Corvallis. So yeah, the book is being researched right now.
Yeah. Did your grandparents ever have any interesting stories?
Well, my grandmother, that's an interesting story. In the 1930s, Chinese American, white people wouldn't hire them for jobs unless they were janitors or menial. So the occupations restricted to Chinese Americans were a restaurant, a laundry, or a lottery. Do you know what a lottery is? Like a keno. You know what keno is?
Keno?
You mark numbers and then they draw the numbers.
Yeah.
That was a derivative from the Chinese lottery. So 30 to 40% of the Chinese in Portland had lotteries. So it's like you mark numbers and they draw, and then you can win or not win.
Yeah.
But this was sanctioned by the Portland police, even though it was gambling. So my grandmother had one of these, and then she also was buying and selling foreign currencies, and she made money in the 1930s doing that. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And my grandfather owned a hop farm in a couple of different towns in Oregon. Hops are the major product to go into making beer, hops. So this was in the 20s and 30s. And I met a banker in south of Portland in 1953 by accident, and he said that this was in Newburgh, Oregon, a small town about 25 miles from Portland. And he said, "Are you related to so-and-so Locke?" I said, "Yeah, that's my grandfather." He picked me up. He was a big guy. And he said, come in, come in. I said, "What?" He said, "Your grandfather was a friend of my father's. My family owned the Bank of Newburgh," he said. And he said, your grandfather kept his own time schedule. He would come and go as he pleased, whether it was closed or open, and pound on the door with his cane. So being an eccentric, but they put up with him. And during the Depression, this is part of American history. there was a shortage of money in the Depression. So various businesses and municipalities issued Depression script. They couldn't make money because only the government could produce money. So he said, this banker said that your grandfather issued script based on his name, and this was part used as money in the Newburgh area. So my family issued money used in the Depression. This is part of American history and Oregon history. Well, I collect that kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
I have verified that these do exist by people that know this kind of stuff. And I've not been able to buy any of my grandfather's Depression script.
Wow.
But I have Depression scripts from various towns, and some were printed on paper, some were printed on leather.
Yeah. Yeah.
And very, very interesting. But that was one of my hobbies. So
Yeah.
my grandparents were interesting people.
Yeah. So, Norman, sort of wrapping up this conversation, do you have any final thoughts on the First Amendment, the future of our country? I know that's a big topic of anxiety for a lot of people I talk to here at the First Amendment Museum. Any advice on anything for future generations to know?
My advice is to fight like hell to keep the amendment rights, the First Amendment rights, because as I said earlier, that is one of the main differences between the United States and the rest of the world is the First Amendment rights. So my advice is fight like hell for the freedoms we have, because you can lose it real easily. There are many groups trying to take down our rights. So my advice is fight for your freedom and fight for your rights.
Excellent. I couldn't end on a better note. That's perfect. Thank you so much, Norman, for joining us for this conversation.
Okay, well, thank you for asking me, and keep in touch.
Yeah. I will share this with you once we get it nice and edited.
Okay. Where are your folks from?
Like my parents, or
Are they Austrians?
oh no, because my last name, no. German and English.
Okay, I missed that one, didn't I?
Yeah, no, hey, you got close. Austrian's pretty good. Yeah, pretty close. Yeah, no, my dad has gotten very much into the ancestry .com thing and doing all the research and putting all that together. It's pretty interesting. We've learned a lot about our family that we didn't know before. So,
Have you heard of Bing Crosby?
oh yeah,
He used to work for my mother's father. He worked for my grandfather in
really?
Spokane. Yeah.
Doing
So
what?
how much? He sang in my grandfather's supper club
Wow.
when before he became, big bucks. So there's a lot of good stories, that you haven't gotten out of me yet.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, this is one of those conversations where I like just want to pick your brain because, like I said, usually we don't get people that have this much experience and this like much connection with actual U.S. history, you know?
Well, another example, how many Americans have had contracts with the Canadian government and the Queen of England?
What'd you do?
I had in 1976 Montreal Olympics, I had a contract with the Canadian government and the Queen of England to distribute part of the Olympic coins in the part of the United States.
How did you get that?
They offered it to me.
Oh.
They offered it to me. So, I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
I can go on and on. I had world famous people have dinner at my house.
Really?
How many people can say that?
Why were they eating dinner at your house?
Oh, because they wanted to. I'll give you an example. Have you got a minute?
Sure, yeah.
Have you heard of Jesse Owens?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay, he had dinner at my house. How many people can say that?
Yeah, but how did
Okay,
how did how did Jesse Owens end up having dinner at your house?
he was involved in the Olympics, and I'm involved in the Olympics.
Oh, okay, right, right.
Okay, so here's the funny part. Chapter two is funnier. Uh, did you know that in the 1930s, a black person could not play on the basketball team for Pacific Coast college teams? Did you know that?
No, I'm not surprised, but I don't think I knew that specifically.
So one of the first blacks to play college basketball was Dr. Walter Reynolds, Portland, Oregon. So I invited Dr. Reynolds to have dinner with Jesse Owens and me at my house. Can you see how he would love it?
Hmm.
So, okay. And the first black editor of a major newspaper in the United States was in Portland, Oregon. The
Hmm.
Oregonian, the Oregonian is the major newspaper. And uh, Bill Hilliard, Hillard, Bill Hilliard was the first black editor of the Oregonian, ergo, the first black editor of any major paper in the United States. So he and I went to the same grade school. So this was in the 1976, and I got a phone call from Bill. He says, "Hey, I hear that Jesse Owens is having dinner at your house. Can I send a photographer and a writer over?" I said, "No." And he started crying. He says, "Come on, Norm." Then he said, "Why?" I said, "It's a friend having dinner at a friend's house. I don't want any publicity."
What
Okay,
did you
so
serve him for dinner?
oh, my wife cooked Chinese dinner.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but anyways, you heard of Bill Gates?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, I've heard of Bill Gates.
Yeah, his this his his sister was a classmate of my son's at Pittsburgh. You know where Pittsburgh is?
Mm-mm.
Uh, it's one of the top schools in the world. It's and later you can go Pitze or Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
It's in California. Okay, my 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 son and his Bill Gates' sister were classmates there. So when they come
Mm.
back go to Seattle, she would stop and have lunch at my house. So you see, I have people like that, and I've got have other people at my house that you say, "Oh my God."
Did
So I'm
well,
not the
does
average.
did your wife make good food?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not the average old guy that you talk to, because I, I no, I knew. Did you know the first organization before the United Nations? Do you know who that was?
The League of
It's the
Nations?
League of Nations. Okay, so you hear of the 6 degree separation, that within 6 people, everybody knows anybody in the
Oh,
world.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard of this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, that's a 1920s, but today it's 4.5 people.
Hmm.
So based on that, I knew Hitler, Mussolini, Neville Chamberlain, because one of my friends was a representative at the League of Nations.
Wow.
You
Well,
see,
where was he from?
she's an American.
Well, like from
She
Oregon, I mean?
represented she represented the Baha'i religion.
Wow, in Oregon? Like she was from Oregon and then
Yeah, but her family was the Bishop family, one of the founders of Hawaii, the
oh wow.
Bellinghams, the Bishop. Her family was one of the big five that founded Hawaii. So I knew her, pretty well. So she was telling me about Hitler, Mussolini, and in the Netherlands. So you see, my background is different from the average person
Well,
because I can go
hopefully
back.
she wasn't a fan of Hitler and Mussolini, was she?
No, she was representing her religion there, but
Yeah.
she met these people. So um, I'm just giving you a little glimpse in what my life is, which is different from most people.
Yeah.
You understand?
What were your thoughts on the slants and Simon Tam?
I don't know a lot about them, but I know before the lawsuit started, I see I was also one of my profession was I was an administrative law judge one time. Besides being other things, I was a judge, so I know a little bit about the law. So when they started the suit, I ran it through my mind the various issues, and I was all for Simon, and I was all for his cause, and I said that he will win.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, yeah.
So, anyways, I'm just giving you a little glimpse of various parts of my life. See,
Yeah, yeah. Do you have a lot of these conversations where people sort of pick your brain, I guess?
mm, not a lot, but sometimes when I open the door, they're sort of astounded because my life goes into sports too.
Oh no,
You
why?
know, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's another story, but
Uh,
uh, so you see, you got a lot of stories here. So no, your museum, I'd like to know a little bit more about it. If you have any literature, mail it to me.
yeah,
You
yeah, sure. We can arrange that. Yeah, I'd be
you,
happy to do that.
you have my home address?
I can get it. I was emailing your daughter earlier.
Okay, yeah, she's an amazing person. She's on the board of the major medical group here, and
Wow.
she's the head of the key committees.
Yeah.
Before she was 30 years old, she was head of a venture capital.
Wow.
Before she was 30.
Wow.
I can go on and on about her. She's
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
amazing.
Why did your ancestors come to the United States originally? Do you know?
Yeah, the answer is the same as anybody for a better life.
Uh-huh.
I mean, really, for a better life. They didn't come here for a bad life, for a worse life.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Do
So,
you,
yeah, go ahead.
do you know when they came?
Oh, approximately 1870.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then the discrimination. When I got married in 1954, my wife and I had a hard time renting an apartment. They said that it's rented, then it's still open. When we called on the phone, they didn't know that we were not white people.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, yeah, come on over. When they saw us, they said, oh, it's gone. So here's the weird part. My parents and grandparents and forefathers were Americans. When these people that are discriminating against me, their folks were still in Europe.
Right, 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 right.
I mean, tears come to my eyes and say, Jesus Christ. Another time, we're having dinner, and this middle-aged white couple said, you speak very good English. And I said, you do too. Then I beat him to the punch. I asked him the question before he asked me. I said, well, when did your folks come from? When did they come and where did they come from? Before he could ask me.
Uh-huh.
When he told me about from Ireland, I said, oh my God. I said, my folks probably fed your starving folks. They were starving in Ireland, and when they came here, my folks probably fed your folks. He didn't know what to say.
You can't say that.
And so I felt kind of shitty about it. So later on, I said, hey, buddy, I said, you shouldn't be so presumptive just because a guy's not white that he does not speak good English. That's when you asked me, you speak good English, and I said, you do too. I'll give you another example of racism. There was an Irish kid in his 30s in the store that I owned, and he says, what nationality are you? I said, I'm a U.S. national, an American. He said, you don't look like an American. So I said, what does an American look like? Oh, God, it stiffed him right in the face. I said, you only been here a couple years and you're already a racist.
Um,
You see how I stopped him cold in his tracks?
I see.
I got other stories about picketing and Krugerrand, the, no, South Africa was an apartheid country, so
Yeah.
America was, some left-wing groups were trying to stop them from selling the Krugerrand in America.
What's the Cougaran?
That's a South African gold coin.
Oh, okay.
So I own a coin store, so they come in to try to stop me from selling a South Africa. I said, I sell coins from 30 different black countries, and this is one country. I says, get off me. Then I said, why don't you pick at the store across the street? It's the biggest retail store. They sell diamonds and gold chains from South Africa. Why are you picking on a minority?
Mm-hmm.
A small business. They don't know what to say. I said, don't talk to me. I said, you're so stupid. So they're picketing my store to tell people stop. So one of my friends, I think in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, late 70s and the 80s. But it gets worse. So one of my friends was a former naval intelligence commander and a friend of the FBI, and he investigated. He says the people that are picketing your store not to buy South African Krugerrands are hired picketers. They're college students. They don't know what the hell's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So he said the people that are behind this duress is the American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker organization. So why is a Quaker organization hiring pickets to picket a business? So my friend, who was a naval intelligence commander, he was also MIT summa cum laude. He brought me Senate hearings notes printed from the Senate hearings that the Quakers were a voice of the Communist Party.
Mm-hmm.
The American Friends Service Committee Quakers are a voice of the Communist Party. This is printed by the Senate investigation. He says, here, this proves what's going on. Well, the average American doesn't know who's pulling the strings. So, I mean, we're digressing, but I'm telling you stories about America that people don't hear.
Did you believe that the American Friends Service Committee was a communist front?
I only believed what the Senate Investigation Committee found out. I believe them.
So what do you think of the world, like the world today? What do you think about politics today? Like when you look around and see what's going on in the news, what are your thoughts?
You don't have the time. You don't have the time to my background is economics, art, finance, philosophy, logic, law. No, I'm not the normal guy you talk to. So I can go off on a tangent on it, any thread that you throw. That's why I said you can come out left field. I can wing it.
Yeah.
So, anyways, send me stuff about your museum because obviously I see things that that you do that are very, very interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll be more than happy to do that. I'll email your daughter tomorrow, get your address, and I'll send a little packet your way.
Okay, so anytime you want to ask, just you got my email and everything.
Well, excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Norman. This was a good, interesting conversation. And I appreciate you again taking the time to have it.
Okay.
All right.
Tell you one last story.
Sure.
So, during the 1976, you got time for two quick stories?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. my wife and I were going to Montreal, so we took United to Chicago. Then they put us on Air France, and everybody was a North African dark-skinned guy except my wife and me. So when we got to this, this was 76, in the 72 Olympics, North Africans massacred machine gun Israeli athletes killed.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah.
So this is the next Olympics, and they pulled everybody from the Air France into interrogation, hundreds of people. And we were the only, my wife and I were the only two non-black skinned Africans. So I said to my wife, "What's going on? I'm wearing a leisure suit, typical American. We don't fit the profile." So my wife said, "It's their country." I said, "I'm ready to go back to my country. Screw them." So that gets funnier. So they have about 6 inspectors at the head of the room. They call your name and you go up to be interrogated. So they call me up. I sit down and he says, "Passport?" I said, "What passport?" I give him a bunch of shit. I said, "We have reciprocity between the United States and Canada that we do not need passports. So do not ask me for a passport unless they change the laws in the 8 hours since I left Portland." So I pushed him right against the wall. Finally, he said something, and I got up off the chair and screamed, "What?" And the whole room froze. And then I did it again. I just got up and screamed, "What?" So I wanted to see how mad I could get him. So I got him all red, he was getting red in the face and sweating. And then finally I said, "You better read this letter." So I pulled it out, slapped it on. He opened it, said, "Mr. and Mrs. Norman Locke, official guests of the Canadian government." He about shit. Oh boy. So he stamped it, said, "Have a good time." I said, after this, I might have, but I would have got him fired. See, I knew people in high places that they wouldn't allow that to happen to me.
Mhm.
So if it went any further, I would have got him fired. So that was, there were other things that were absolutely interesting, but that's my First Amendment. They're not going to keep me quiet.
Yeah.
You know, anyway, I just thought I'd tell you, I pushed him. He's an official. See, he's not used to being pushed.
Yeah.
But I know when to push, when not to push.
Right.
So, anyways, I'm kind of a loudmouth beep bleep. So.
Yeah. No, I like it. It's nice to talk to someone who's frank and honest and blunt.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was afraid to go to China and different countries because I was afraid that I'd speak up and they'd throw me in the slammer.
Did you go to China?
Oh yeah, I went to China. I went to Thailand. I went to Taiwan. I went to, I've been to different places.
Did you ever get in trouble anywhere?
No, I didn't have any problem keeping, because I went to China with the Portland mayor and the city hall groups because that was a sister city.
Yeah.
Portland is a city of roses. So
Mhm.
Suzhou built a rose garden in our honor, and they're going to cut the ribbon, and we were invited to go to the grand opening. So I was asked by City Hall to go. I said, "I'm not a member of Sister City. I'm not, I'm not going." He said, "No, we want you to go because you're you, not because you're a member of this." So I went and I kept my mouth shut, but it wasn't a problem. I didn't feel restrained.
Yeah.
Because, I tried to just get along. So no, I've been in different places. I didn't have the problems that I thought I would have.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Yeah.
yes, that's. Thank you for listening to an old guy's stories.